Yeah,
Um,
sure.
so the key things that I do is helping people fast track leadership. And I'll just give you a little bit of background on me, and then we'll look at these three critical mistakes that managers are often making. But a little bit about me. I love sports. In particular, I'm a Collingwood member. So it's a picture of me with my partner and my son after last year's grand final. Unfortunately, we didn't do so well this year, and didn't make the finals coming into the end of the AFL season now. So I've had a good year last year. I'm happy with that. I also like to try and keep fit. I've done some fun runs, and you can see me struggling along in one of those there. But for a while now, I've also been facilitating leadership development programs and being a leadership development coach. I had nearly 20 years in corporate before I started doing that. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. You can see a photo with me on the left-hand side of one of the groups from a few years ago that I took through a 5-day leadership development program. And really, today, the leadership development, helping people to become the best leaders they can be, is very much my passion and purpose, because what I've noticed is that when there's a group of people, when there's a team, a work group, and they have a good leader, then you have a very positive, happy environment. When you don't have a great manager, it can be quite an average or negative experience. So my passion, my purpose is to try and help all teams, all organisations to have better leaders and therefore have a happier and more satisfied experience in their life. So just a little bit more about me. I first became a manager in my late 20s. So I was performing well in my role, but I got thrown straight into the deep end. I made a lot of mistakes, even though I didn't realise how many mistakes I was making at the time. But I was improving through trial and error, and I thought I was doing quite well. I thought I was doing better than I really was. I worked long hours and put in a lot of effort, and in some areas I got some good results. There was a lot of gaps that I wasn't really fully aware of that leadership involved. And eventually I got some leadership training and coaching. And then I improved more in a year than I had in the previous about 7 years by getting that guidance and that training and opening my eyes to things that I really didn't know about. And then others started to ask me to help them in terms of leadership. So for a few different reasons, including not wanting to travel and work as much in the corporate sector, I stepped out of that and became a full-time leadership coach and leadership development facilitator. And I've run leadership training for over 1,500 people. I've coached over 300 managers one-on-one. And more importantly, I've helped those managers to work less hours, have a more balanced life, and yet get promoted, earn more, and have higher performing, motivated team who hit their targets, which is something a lot of people didn't think was possible. But it is. I've proven that with many people. And this leads to increased levels of job satisfaction and options around their career as well. So given all of that, what we're looking at today is 3 critical mistakes that I've noticed in my career, and I made them myself initially, that most managers make. And we don't mean to, we accidentally make them when we're starting, and they can put us in a very poor position. And I'll outline those and how we got to make those, and then we'll look at what you can do instead to create a high-performing team and be a really engaging leader. Okay, so let's have a look at the current state, what's happening out there. So firstly, it's very consistent. It's been 15-odd years now where the research is showing us that only 23%, give or take, of employees are actually really engaged. So 77% are not engaged or not fully engaged. And by far the most impact on this level of engagement is the employee's immediate manager, their direct manager. And that has up to 80% factor around whether the employee feels like they're engaged or not, and that flows through as to whether they actually stay in the role or not. Other research shows us that half of all employees feel like they are being micromanaged. Yet if you ask the managers, they do not think they're doing micromanaging at all. So we've got a disconnect there. And 68% of employees from research with Leadership IQ say that managers don't fix some frustrations that could be easily fixed. So employees are frustrated that their managers aren't doing these things. And what does this lead to? It leads to big costs in the organisation, as well as costs for the individual. So 75% of employees have left their jobs because of their manager, directly because that's the reason they stayed. Okay. Now, low engagement, also, as we mentioned earlier, now that, according to Gallup, costs around about 20% of somebody's salary. So now we're starting to talk some interesting dollars about what it costs if organisations have low engagement, and it costs 20% of their salary in terms of productivity. Unwanted turnover, connecting back to that first point. And if we're going to average it out, the research says you could put it in as 150% of a salary cost to replace someone that the organisation would have preferred to keep. Employee theft is higher in organisations with low engagement. Industrial action is higher in organisations with low engagement. And the number of days that people are absent, what we call it chronic absenteeism, defined by people taking off days because they really don't feel like coming to work, they're not engaged, is obviously much higher in the organisations where engagement is low. So that's further dollars that it's costing the organisation, further pressure that it's putting on managers. Okay. Work cover costs are higher in organisations with lower engagement. So these are all significant costs in the organisation, and there's also costs to the individual managers as well, trying to manage all that and taking on the workload. So how did we get here? What's the problem? Let's have a look at this. So the first thing that happens is that for most organisations, like I mentioned earlier, when somebody gets promoted into a management position, a team leader position, a supervisor position, they're usually the best performer in the role as an individual contributor, a person who does the work, okay? And then they get the opportunity to be the team leader or the manager. But essentially, you're thrown in the deep end because the organisations tend not to give you the appropriate training and support and guidance to move from being that high-performing individual contributor into being a team leader or a manager, and they're different things. The organisations also imply that keep doing what you're doing and try and figure it out yourself. We're here if you need us, okay? And that puts a lot of pressure on people coming into that management role. And many people spend years, even many years, decades, going through this trial and error, trying to figure out what is the best way to be a good and effective manager and leader. Right? And this also has an impact on senior management, even though they don't realise it at the time, because they have to get involved much more to support all of the managers. And it increases the risk that your person who was the high performer, who you've put into a management position and now feels like they're not performing as well, well, they're some of the people that often leave the organisation because they're not getting the support that they need. And it restricts the growth of the organisation. Okay, so it's not an ideal situation, yet it's the most common situation we find when people are put into a management position. And even the third management position, it's still sometimes happening. The other thing that happens very commonly is that there is some training. It's what I call the slow track. So it's not quite as much as the deep end, as the stress and pressure. And what they do is an organisation will provide some level of courses or training for the manager to take on to help them. Okay. Now, it seems like the right idea. Unfortunately, there's a few things that don't work so well here. One is that often the courses come many months, even years, after the person has taken on the management role or the team lead role. But the second and even more important thing is that most people struggle to implement what they learn in these courses. I run many of these courses. I've run them over many years. There's lots of great content in there. But what there isn't is enough follow-up and support for the managers to take what they've learnt and use it actually in their roles in their everyday work environment and interacting with others. Right? So again, it means that the managers are developing more slowly than they might possibly be able to. It means they're not close to being at their best, their highest potential, at their very best. And that leads to gaps with succession planning, more issues around how you're handling clients, and again, lower business value and lower business growth. And what we ideally want, and unfortunately, only a few percent of organisations do this and do this well, is you want a transition as anyone moves into a team leader or a management role. So you can transition with a clear plan from being the person doing to being the person managing and leading. And even from your first team lead role up to a more senior management role and so on. There should be a transition plan all the way through. And within that, there should be some clear, proven systems that are given to the manager and that you have ongoing help and support and coaching to develop the skills and put in place the proven systems so that you can improve and grow as a manager and a leader and become an effective leader who creates a high-performing team, okay? And it's not a 1 or 2 day course. It's not a course here and there. It's an ongoing process that you're working on every day, every week of the time that you're in these roles. And that ends up with an organisation having a clear succession plan, having much more engaged people in the organisation, both managers and team members. And that leads to higher engagement, which leads to better retention, which leads to more profit, which leads to a higher business value. There's so many positive flow-ons from being able to implement it this way, and yet very few organisations do it this way. Over 90% of organisations are either throwing their managers into the deep end or putting them on the slow track. Okay. So what does this mean? What does this look like? And here's what I want you to be able to tell me a bit about your experiences or ask some questions. I've asked hundreds and hundreds of managers now to rate themselves on how they see they're performing at the moment, right? And give themselves a rating out of 10, where 10 out of 10 is them at their best. It's not perfect. It's something they can achieve. It's them at their best. You at your best is 10 out of 10. So how would you rate yourself over the last 12 months on how you're going? 80% of these people rate themselves somewhere between 3 and 6 out of 10. But almost all of them want to be 8 to 10 out of 10. They just don't know quite how to get there, or they occasionally experience getting to maybe 8 out of 10, but they don't know how to be able to stay there and sustain that. Okay. So any thoughts here? I'd be really keen for people to share how they would rate themselves, or how you think the people in the organisation are going in terms of being at their best.
So I would rate myself a 6.
Okay,
yeah.
Right. Thanks, Ed. So you're very much fitting into exactly what I'm hearing from everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, and so that's something that's very common. And please jump in if there's anyone else who wants to share or ask questions about this. Happy to answer those as well.
And my view is also, I would like to go with 6 as well. The reason is that if we rate above and after that it's a kind of a performance is going to be under, that would be a difference. So otherwise, if you are going to rate lower and going to go above and beyond, so that would be great.
Right. Okay. Sorry, could you just say that last bit again? If you're going to...
if you are going to rate low and if you are going to perform better, so obviously that would be great always, instead of set the high expectation and with whatever the reason, if you are not going to perform or reach that expectation, so that would be a difficult scenario. So that's the reason, go with 6.
Yeah. Okay. I can understand that. And if you're looking forward, that I can understand that you give that kind of a rating and then see if you can outperform that. Absolutely. Yep. That's a good way to look at it. What I was asking these people is, how have you performed over the last 12 months? So going backwards. So it's actually looking at what you've been doing rather than projecting forward. That's okay. It's just a good idea to get to think about, where are we at in terms of being at our best as a leader, and what do we need to do to get towards that level? And as you can see here, most people either don't know or they are not getting the help and support that they need to get to this level, to give them the guidance to be able to be their best more consistently. So what does this look like? So for the people that are in the 3-4 sort of category, it means their confidence is consistently low. They feel like they've got a high workload. They tend to be doing more of the work themselves, especially the harder tasks, the more complex tasks. They're not finding time to be strategic. They're not finding time to help develop the members in their team. And they're feeling like they're really moving towards potentially burning out at the rate that they're working. Or they might think about leaving. And unfortunately, I've had quite a number of people who have been in that space and they've decided to step out of being a manager before they burned out, which is really disappointing from my perspective. Those up to about 6 out of 10, so this might apply to some of you. What people describe there is the bit of a confidence roller coaster. It could go up and down, just depending on how things are going in any given day or any week. You've got some training of some course, some sort of courses. You try and implement some of those things, but you fall back into the old habits. So you're wanting to be able to improve. You may even know some things that you've learnt that you'd like to be able to improve to be a consistently better leader. But you're struggling a little bit to implement those things, and it becomes easier to go back to old habits. And again, overload is there, sometimes overwhelm, and so it's hard to find any time to be strategic. But for those that are at that 8 to 10 out of 10, what they describe is consistently very high confidence, and they have a way to make sure they maintain high confidence. They're operating in a way that they engage with people and empower others, and they know how to use their time so that they can go about that engagement rather than feel like they're fighting fires all of the time. Yet they still are very good at holding people accountable. They make time for being strategic and adding strategic value and being able to think proactively rather than feeling like they're being reactive all of the time. Okay. And so when I describe this, that's where you can see so many people say, yes, that's where I want to be. How do I get there? We'll talk a little bit more about that soon. But first, let's have a look at what's getting in the way from this, specifically from the manager's point of view. And I want you to think about these things as they relate to you or people in your organisation or past managers that you've had. So what we find is that most managers say to themselves, it's easier to do it myself. When I do it, I know it'll be done right. So has that been something that you have thought to yourself?
I used to a little while ago. I don't think so anymore. I know there are smarter people than me in my team, so I delegate most of it there.
Okay, great. So it seems like you have worked through some of these things that we're going to be talking about here.
Yeah.
So many people get stuck on this one, that they're still doing it every week, sometimes every day for some people. So thanks, Sid, for sharing that. Here's a couple of other ones for you to think about. Because if you're doing this is one of the ways that you're sabotaging yourself. You're getting in your own way with making these mistakes. What about this one? All right. Do you or some managers protect the team from failure in some way by fixing situations, putting out fires, taking their work and improving it, bringing it up to standard? Anyone here do some of that?
Not anymore.
Okay. Not anymore. There's a common theme there. Anyone else?
I used to in the beginning, like in the first few years of being a manager, I used to do this, but not anymore.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So, thank you for sharing. Again, that's similar to what I've been hearing from so many people, and it just depends as to how quickly some people figure it out and what kind of support. Some people, as you said, it takes a few years and you can be on your way. Some people, it takes more years. So here's another one that people are often doing. Okay. Giving your team members answers to all their questions. As they come with a question, and this is one of the ones that I fell into the trap of for the first 5 or so years. So they ask me a question, I give them all the answers. Okay. So think about it. Is that something that you used to do, you're currently doing? Maybe some of the other managers in your organisation are doing. And then the other one that we tend to do is tell the people in our team exactly what they need to do to complete their tasks. Right? And this can often feel like it's implied that we need to do this from our own managers, because our managers are saying, you know how to do this, you do this really well, you've got the expertise, you've got the experience, make sure they do it. So that we tend to tell people exactly what they need to do. Seems like the right thing to do, right? That's what our bosses seem to be indicating. Well, these are the things that we actually need to stop doing, okay? So these are the three critical mistakes that managers make accidentally because it seems logically like the right thing to do. And unfortunately, these are the types of things that lead to overwhelm and burnout for managers, and it stops you from performing at your best. Okay, so let me just talk a little bit more about why this is the mistakes that will lead to this burnout and to average to lower performance, right? So the first part is, if you're stepping in to put out the fires, to fix the work, then what is happening is that all of the key work comes back onto you as the manager, and you're training your people to be able to just do okay work, and then you'll fix it. So for the majority of people, that means they are going to do just what they need to do, and then they'll let the boss, their manager, step in and fix it. Okay, which means you're always going to have the major load of the work on you. Same again with the answering the questions. Right? If they keep coming to you with questions and you give them answers, they're going to come with more questions, you're going to give them answers, and that means that, again, you're the person that they've got to come to get all their questions answered. And what this means is that they stop thinking as much. They start thinking that, oh, if something comes up that I'm not sure of, I'll just ask my manager, rather than starting to think for themselves. Again, puts the load back on you as the manager. It leaves your team being just average performance. And third one's the same sort of thing. When you're telling people exactly what they need to do to complete the tasks, and all the responsibility becomes on you because you're the one who's put all the tasks in place, okay? And the people aren't in your team, they're not fully taking that on board as something that they've bought into, that's their responsibility most of the time. And so much of the effort now is going to come from you as the manager, and you've got to do a lot more work in following up people and making sure they're doing each of these tasks to get the overall outcome, which you think you now need to do in order to make sure they're doing a good job. And you can even feel like you're being supportive, but this is where most of the employees will say, my boss is doing some micromanaging.
Right. I do have a question for the third one.
Yes.
So the question is, So I'm a software engineering manager, and then so as part of my responsibilities, I define what good looks like.
Yep.
And then we say, okay, to arrive here, these are the things that we need to do to increase our engineering practices, maturity practices, right? So I mean, there's a bit of a give and take here. So it's like, I work with the leads to say, okay, this is what we need to do to arrive here, to increase our level of maturity, right? So I mean, I'm just trying to understand, how can I delegate that part to them to say that, because sometimes they don't have that experience. So, and they won't be able to define that. So I'm just trying to understand, is that a bad thing, or, what is this telling people exactly what they need to do? How is that different, or how can I do things differently for this kind of situation?
Yeah. So the key starting point here to do something differently is to have a very open joint discussion. Even if you've got some pretty good ideas in your head about what the outcome looks like, or what the process or the steps should look like, okay? So what Because what we're looking for here is that the people involved and the people who have got to do the tasks feel like they've contributed, they've had some input, they've been heard, and they want to take on the responsibility of being involved, as compared to they feel like they've been excluded and told what to do. Okay. So what that means, you said you have a look at, you define what success looks like, what an ideal outcome is. So one of the ways that you could change this up here is that instead of you fully defining that, you give a little bit of information and you also then ask for the input from the others. What do you see success looks like? How would you describe it in this situation? Okay. And then you can, depending on how well they go, and when you've got people with less experience, you've got to ask more questions and give a little more prompts. And you can put in some of your own suggestions to make sure that you don't miss critical things, but you're building it together.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so when you come out with the final version, which you probably could have developed all by yourself, but when you come out with that final version, the people who are going to implement it have felt like they have been listened to and they've contributed to creating it.
Yep.
Okay. And then you can also put the responsibility and accountability back towards them in saying that you have helped to create this, you believe this will work, what are the key milestones, what are the measures that we should have, and you believe you'll achieve those, so we can hold you accountable to achieving those, and they're involved in that part of the process.
Yep. Okay.
And so it's much more likely that you're going to get people who buy in, who take responsibility, and then they're more likely to be proactive in achieving the tasks and the outcomes that you're looking for, instead of the manager who defined it all having to be the one always following up, chasing them.
Yep. Okay. Makes sense. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Good question. Thank you. All right. So that was one part of what to do instead, and please feel free to jump in with any other questions. Let's have an overview, look at an overview of what you can do in terms of creating the ideal level of skills and approach to be at your very best as a leader. So the key things that you need to be developing in terms of skills are understanding yourself, self-awareness, and your own identity as a person, as a leader, your strengths and weaknesses and values, and being authentic to yourself. You need to understand your impact, what impacts you and how you impact others with the way that you work and operate. You need to then, under people management, know how to build trust. Trust is the foundation of being an effective and an engaging leader, and that will get you to creating high-performing teams. And the leap refers to moving from being the person who does a lot of the work to the person who leads people, lets go, and empowers others, develops others to be able to do the work. So you get things done through others. And then strategic leadership is about how you're aligning the people within the team to work together to get the best outcome from the team, and then how the team aligns with the broader organisation and their high level of strategic objectives and purpose. And then the strategic acumen is how you develop your strategic thinking skills and how you can add value strategically to the organisation, so broader than just getting the tasks done within your team. And that creates a high-performing team and organisation with a positive culture. Now, more specifically, in terms of helping you to be at your best as a leader, first thing you need to do is start to think of leadership development, being an effective and engaging leader, as developing a set of skills that you need to practice and continually improve on. Right?
Michael,
yes.
Sorry, I did have a few questions in the previous slide.
Yeah.
Would you be able to go back? Yeah.
Yep.
So, can you just elaborate what does leap and acumen mean again? Here, I didn't quite understand that.
Okay. So in the strategic area, align is to do with alignment. So what that means is that the people within your team, firstly, the way that they're working with their roles and responsibilities and what they're contributing is aligned. So it helps each other within the team and is contributing to a team output that is useful and valuable to the organisation.
Yep.
And making sure that there's nice collaboration within the team, that there's appropriate accountability, that there's not too much overlap, there's not too much gap between the people and the roles, and people can see that what they're doing has value and contributes to the team goals and contributes to the organisational goals. Okay, and it also becomes about how your team is aligned with other teams around you and in the organisation. And that's where it's like pieces to the puzzle. So we should be working together. One of the ways in the workshops that I describe this, so you can get a bit of a sense of what we mean, is to think of people in a rowing boat. If you think of 8 people in a rowing boat, like in the Olympics, they've got their 8 oars, or if they're sculls, they've got 2 each, and making sure that each of the oars are aligned and going into the water at the same time. Okay. Because in some organisations, it's kind of like they're working hard, but the oars are going into the water at different times. So we're almost working against each other sometimes.
Yep. Yeah, the question was for Acumen and the lead. Sorry.
Oh, okay,
I did understand the alignment part, but yeah, just wanted to understand Acumen and the lead.
My apologies.
Sorry.
So we'll do Acumen as we're on strategies. Acumen is strategic level thinking. So that's firstly starting to think about how does my team and group impact the broader organisation, and how can we and I contribute to the broader organisation. So the first part there is that you're thinking more than just what your team is doing. You're thinking about what is the organisation's objectives, what are the organisation's purpose, and how are we contributing to that. All right. And making sure that I'm spending some time thinking about that and thinking about how things could improve, be different. And then you go a step further where you start to think of the organisation within the industry or the marketplace. Okay, so where do we sit? What's with our objectives? What's our strategic plan? What's our strategic advantages, disadvantages? How does that relate back to my team? How does that relate back to how I'm contributing to the organisation? Regularly thinking about, is there something that I can do that will help with our strategic advantage that we've got, or that minimise a risk that we're looking at strategically, rather than just focusing around getting everything done. You know, the tasks, the emails coming up.
Yep.
And the leap is about stopping doing things yourself and getting your team members to do them. Okay? And that's one of the hardest things for most people to do in the early years of them becoming a manager, is letting go. And the highest level way to think about this is a manager should ask themselves, what are the things that only I can do, right? Because of some specific criteria, privacy legislation, certification, and they're the things that the manager needs to do for a particular reason. Everything else, you should be considering, how do you get your team to be doing those tasks or learning how to do those tasks and responsibilities. Okay.
So I'm just curious, why did you choose the word lead and not delegation? I mean, this sounds more like delegation, right? So
it is delegation. We could have put delegation. We could have put let go. I put the leap in there because when I put delegation, people go, oh yeah, I know about delegation. yet still most people don't do it very well. So the reason I put the leap is because for most people, there's this big gap that they've got to jump over between doing it themselves and being able to get other people to do that with a high performance outcome.
Right.
And it's also a little bit of a leap of faith because you've got to believe in other people.
Yep. Makes sense. Yeah.
So it's mostly getting people thinking, the reason that I put the leap. Great questions. Thank you. All right. Is that okay? We can keep moving on from there, Sid? Thank you.
Yep.
So these are all skills, as I said, and most people haven't stopped to think about that we need to develop these skills in order to be at our very best as a leader. But when you stop and I ask you, think about it in terms of it's like learning a guitar or how to dance or how to play tennis, and you can see it from a different perspective, and most people start to understand. You know, if I wanted to be good at tennis, what would I need to do? You know, I wouldn't just read a book and go to a one-day workshop and then go and try and play on the weekend, expect myself to be really good at it. I know that I would need to get some coaching, have some practice, learn what I need to improve, have some more practice, get some more coaching, get some more feedback, practice, and keep working on continuing to improve. So leadership is exactly the same, and it just becomes a matter of how you go about putting in place that process to develop these skills and get better, because you can do it in a slow way or you can do it in a fast way. And there's a great TED talk out there where a world-renowned surgeon talks about how much he improved by getting himself a coach. And he said, if you want to be great at something, get yourself a coach. All right. So here's 3 steps that can help you to be at your very best every day as a leader and create a high-performing team. So I'll go through these quickly first, and then we'll go back into each one. So the first one is creating trust and psychologically safe environment. Second one is using proven leadership processes for the key leadership skills. Like we've spoken about delegation. When you see people delegating in organizations, they go about it in hundreds and hundreds of different ways, and many of them are not effective. Same with giving feedback. Very, very few people know what effective feedback looks like. And I've literally asked hundreds and hundreds of people before we give them the information, what is effective feedback, and they can't define it. Difficult conversations is another one that comes up. And even the steps to enabling people to be at their best. Most people don't know what that looks like. And then step 3 is about getting that expert guidance and support to continually be developing your leadership skills. It's not something that you, again, can do a course once off or read a book and then try and figure it out yourself. You need support ongoing. We'll talk about more of that in a moment. So firstly, creating a team environment that's based on trust and is psychologically safe, which is also now a legal requirement for us to create a psychologically safe environment. But the key things here we're talking about, and Google's research is one of them, is that psychological safety, Google found in their research, was the #1 factor for a high-performing team. So that's where people feel like they're safe, they can be themselves, they can speak up, they can be heard, they are valued for who they are, and they are trusted. And trust is a foundation of psychological safety. Most managers, when we survey them, when you look at the research, when I ask them anecdotally, believe they're doing all the right things to build trust, that their team members, their employees don't agree. They're saying that managers do some things to build trust, but they do a lot of little things that break trust or chip away at trust. So employees also say that the managers tend to focus mostly on tasks and results. For example, quick example is I say we had a discussion with my manager. The manager will say, yeah, I catch up with them regularly, you know, it's good, I'm building trust. And the team members will say, when I catch up with my manager, all they do is ask me about where I'm at with my tasks and why I haven't done something. So they're quite different perspectives. So most managers don't realize small actions that break trust. Right? I'll give you a couple of quick examples. One client that I was just talking to this week, they had quite an insight as to why they left their last job as part of the coaching session. So she was talking about what happened in the last role. And one of the things she said is that, we had a meeting and my boss said, yep, we're going to do all these things that you've mentioned that would help to create a better environment and for you to be happier here. And they walked away, and 2 weeks later, they hadn't done anything. She hadn't heard anything. And so in that situation, a lack of communication and follow-up had broken some trust. And then she eventually got offered a new job. And when then her current employer came back and said, look, we're going to do all these things to fix and improve, change some of the things you suggested, basically she said it was too late. And it was only in the coaching session she realized that was because trust had been broken. And so even though they said they were going to do these things, because the trust had been broken, she wasn't really confident that they would do some or all of them. And another one that comes up all of the time is one-on-one meetings with team members. Okay. So many managers change or cancel or turn up late to these. Okay. I had a client just last week that I was talking to, it's been in a new role for 3 months, supposed to have weekly one-on-ones with their manager, and they've had one in 3 months. Now, what I found is that soon as you have changed, cancelled or turned up late for 2 of your one-on-one meetings within a 6-month period, then you start to break trust, to lose trust with that team member. Okay. Now, the managers tell me, because I'm coaching them as well in many instances, that it's because things came up. It was urgent. Something was really important that needed to be done. And so they couldn't help it. Unfortunately, it breaks trust, because if you have committed to having a one-on-one with your team member, then by regularly changing that, you are literally saying to them something else is more important than you. When you do that, that breaks trust. All right. And again, feel free, please, to jump in and ask any questions. So, using proven leadership processes for the key leadership skills. As I said earlier, most managers are actually dealing with situations as they come up. Okay, and this doesn't develop your skills because you're doing a different thing each time. Delegation, feedback. It doesn't make you effective, or you're on a slow path to becoming effective. What you need is to be given to have access to proven processes that other people have used as managers and leaders, and it's been proven that they work, and then you learn how to do that. It would be just like, again, if you're learning tennis and you're trying to learn how to serve, trying to just figure it out yourself, or having a coach say, here are the key things that you need to do in order to serve well, and then you can go and practice that approach. If you're wanting to build a house, would you want a builder who figured things out as they went along, or uses a plan, proven, repeatable process? It's pretty obvious. So think about things like giving effective feedback, right? Delegation, conflict, creating high performance, enabling people to be at their best, building trust. Most managers deal with these things just ad hoc as they come up, whereas what you really want is to be given a library, if you like, of the processes that have been proven on how these work. And so then you can develop the skills of implementing those, and you're much more likely to be a highly effective leader. And so then you take that to the next step, where you need the support and guidance every week to be consistently developing your skills. So you need to be thinking about it and reflecting on it. Instead of just focusing on getting things done, it becomes focusing on your growth and development, and also the growth and development of your team members. And it's about then growing with these key leadership skills. So you're being very focused on the areas that you're growing on and how that will improve. And as our surgeon said, get a coach, some form of a coach, support, mentor, guidance that help you to get to be at your best. Think about, we've just had the Olympics, we've got the Paralympics going on at the moment, we've got the US Open tennis going on. How do these high-level sports people get to be at their best? They don't do it on their own. They don't do it by ad hoc trial and error trying to figure it out. They get people around them to help support and guide them, and they're working on it every day to be better and to improve. Part of this, which I encourage you to think about doing, is writing your own authentic leadership vision statement. Okay, so who are you at your very best as a leader while you're being authentic and true to yourself? Most people haven't done this. It's a great starting point. And then find yourself the accountability partner that's going to help you with this guidance and consistent development and growth in your leadership skills. So, questions or thoughts on those 3 points? Come towards wrapping up.
I think the vision statement is the hardest.
Which segment is the hardest, sorry?
The vision statement.
Yes.
For me, that is the hardest.
Yeah, have you done something like that?
No. That's,
yeah, it is. It's something that is a challenge. And look, if that's something that you want to do, I'm happy to send you some steps and some guidelines so you can work through that.
Yep.
And start drafting that process if you'd like. Yeah, it is. Most people haven't thought about it, and the ones that do, it becomes hard, so they don't do it. Yep. Thank you. Any other thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I've been pretty quiet. I've also said all this before, and then the last year I haven't been in a management role. I've been working in a development role, but I've come through from software development to manager and different levels, and no guidance on the way through. It's just everyone seems to be thrown in. Some places, some of the bigger companies have had like one-day management sessions, which are very lightweight. No one gets any real ideas. It's just trying to push the company values. That's about the best you can do in those sort of management sessions. No one really gives you training or even one-on-ones with how to be a manager. No one has the time. And then even as a manager role, you're not purely a manager. You're shifting between managing and developing software and everything else. It would be good to actually have like dedicated coaching time for a group of managers when they become managers in the companies to go through it rather than just the one day. But time, money, it's all very difficult for a lot of places, but certainly something that certainly is needed.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate that input, and you're describing some of the experiences that I've been mentioning. So thank you for reinforcing that. And you're right too. Time, money, those sorts of things is some of the things that people bring up, and they, some people say it would be great to give every one of our new managers one-on-one executive coaching like we do for the board or the senior managers. So that's, we haven't got time and money to do that. So one of the things that I've done, which I'll show you briefly in a moment, is created a way that it can be very flexible, minimal amount of time, and a much lower investment for companies to do some group ways of coaching their managers to develop these sorts of skills. So please jump in with any other thoughts or questions, but I might as well keep going from here into thinking about where you go next here or within your organisation. So you can keep going the way that you're going, or the organisations can keep going with putting people in the deep end or on the slow track, but it is important to think about, if you do that, what's it going to cost in terms of burnout for you or the people in your organisation, confidence, imposter syndrome going up and down, slower growth of organisations, slower levels of development and promotion. And maybe it kind of means for sometimes you're either in a similar position in a few years, or if you're in a different position, it could be even more stress. What would it be like if you got onto the fast track and you have consistently high confidence, high performing, highly engaged team, right? You're adding strategic value to the organisation, all while working less hours and feeling more in control. And here's an example, just a couple of quick examples that I'll leave you to read for a moment about Alex and his experience and how he developed his leadership skills, got promoted, became more effective. And then I've had this sort of example quite a few times where somebody's highly experienced, highly skilled, done an MBA, and yet the fine-tuning of the right techniques and subtle things to do made a huge difference to engagement of the team and operating, how they're operating to high performance, creating more balance. So for those that are interested, here's some information about a possible option going forward. It's the Engaging Leader Transformation Program that I've developed. And it's not like the others. It's a way to transform into a leader. So it helps you along the way rather than just giving you a course of a day here and there or a manual. It's a program over a period of months, and it includes video-based training. So this is where the time and flexibility comes in, so that you can watch that in your own time and you can watch it back over again. But you also submit worksheets that I give you specific feedback on. Again, you can do that in your own time. So it's very flexible, but you're still getting the specific feedback. You get some one-on-one coaching sessions, and then you get live small group coaching sessions for 12 months to help you to develop these skills over a period of time. And you also get a mastermind group on Facebook that you can ask me or the others in the group any questions that you've got and talk through any challenges in confidential environments. Now, the other part of it that's different is that you get a 30-day test drive where you can take it on and do it, and it's risk-free. You get your money back. So no other training program does that. They don't give you your money back. And it's about done with you implementation. So it's not about giving you the information in the manual and saying, off you go, good luck. It's about implementing a system and helping you along the way to make sure you're developing those skills, again, just like a tennis coach would do along the way. So you can devote 2 hours to it, a little bit in your own time, a little bit with the coaching, and you can be at your best in as little as 90 days. So the way to get started, if you're interested, is to set up a time with me to have a further chat, and then we can see if it would be something that would be useful and appropriate for you, and take it from there. So here's how you would contact me. And just while I leave that up, I'm open to any thoughts or feedback or any questions that we've got today. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you spending the time and giving me the opportunity to go through this. Was that useful for you?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for your time. And seen a lot of all this before, and I think everyone has a similar problems and similar experiences or different ones. It's just good to have good to have an option in the future to try and get the training.
Yeah, absolutely. Please let me know if there's anything that I can do, if you want to consider the training, or if you just got any specific questions or specific challenges that you'd like some input on, please feel free. Just reach out, shoot me a question, and I'll help in any way that I can.